Hi everyone. I'd like to take a few minutes today to talk about a few legal changes occurring in the United States. Briefly about the first and in a little more depth about the second. The first that I'd like to talk about is South Carolina and the recent legal changes that they've put in place concerning death row executions. For most of the United States, the preferred method of execution has been lethal injection. A lethal injection occurs with a three-part drug cocktail that includes an anesthetic to prevent pain, a paralytic to prevent movement, and then to finally stop the heart or respiration. For some time, there's been a shortage of the drugs needed to perform lethal executions, or lethal injection executions rather, because many companies who create the anesthetic needed have been refusing to provide drugs for use in lethal injection. As with many others across the country and the planet, there's been a rising understanding that the use of executions is not a deterrent to future crime. It's not a method to manage justice. It's a method of retribution. And while many people will say that it's necessary to provide closure and justice for the victims of the person who is being executed, that's really not the way things work. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm going to speak for people whose loved ones have been brutalized or murdered by somebody who's on death row. They'll have to speak for themselves. But I will speak as someone who definitely understands the desire to have somebody who has hurt you or those you care about eliminated as a future threat. That I can speak to from personal experience. But I have learned over the years the futility of that as a method of justice. There is no justice for most of the crimes being committed that would place somebody in a death row position. In fact, the only thing that could potentially be useful in an execution is, as I said earlier, to eliminate the potential for future threats. But that can be accomplished through life imprisonment. So if that's the case, then there's really no useful reason to continue with executions other than revenge. And people continue with that mindset, placing it under the veil of justice, when they're definitely not the same thing. But back to the method of execution. Due to the continued unavailability of the drugs needed to continue lethal injection, which was the most humane method that we had available in the United States, states are returning to the electric chair, and in South Carolina's case, the firing squad, because we officially live in one of the worst timelines. It's 2021, and in the United States of America, a state has decided that firing squad is a method that is neither too cruel or too inhumane a method of execution. They consider it not cruel or unusual to pump somebody full of bullets and let them either bleed out in pain or go through the horror and shock of feeling their body shut down. Even worse, they're requiring the people on death row to choose between the electric chair or the firing squad. And if they refuse to choose, they are going to default to the electric chair. So much for giving people a freedom of choice. The reason I bring this up is largely because of the second legal change that's coming up. The Texas governor, who recently made a statement that he would no longer enforce mandatory mask mandates in schools because people should have a freedom of choice and bodily autonomy, feels exactly the opposite way about women who are pregnant. They are pushing he has already passed, rather, a law in Texas. They call it a 6-week heartbeat ban, is what I believe they tend to refer to them as, where essentially after the 6-week point, which is too early for many women to even know that they're pregnant, that abortions would be banned. However, they are not allowed to do this at a state level, and he is too cowardly to push that at a state level, knowing that it would be denied. So instead, he's essentially deputizing any average citizen to file civil suits against a person attempting to get an abortion after 6 weeks, or anybody who provides any type of aid to a person attempting to get an abortion. And that last section is so broad that it could include anybody from a doctor who simply informs a woman of the options that are available as far as abortions, to a person providing an Uber ride to the abortion clinic. If you allowed somebody to borrow your phone to schedule the appointment, you could be tried under this law. And these would be civil cases performed or brought against you by average citizens. So any misguided individual who learns that somebody is attempting to receive an abortion could work to make life completely miserable for them and anybody who assisted them, with civil cases up to $10,000. And if it wasn't clear enough that this was simply an attempt to make life miserable for people attempting to receive assistance with abortion procedures, the people who are being sued can not countersue to recover legal fees, which means that you can tie up individuals in legal quagmires indefinitely, over and over again, until they are drained of any funds available to live their lives. It's obviously one more way to punish people who are trying to take control over their lives and their own bodies. And again, this is from the same state and the same individuals who it would not be uncommon to see "Don't Tread on Me" flags waving from their trucks as they drive by. These are the people who scream against government encroachment on their rights, but they don't hesitate to take those rights away from anyone else when it comes to bodily autonomy. Then they'll quickly turn around and claim that things like universal basic income, guaranteed health care, increased minimum wage aren't needed in their society, where they're forcing people to have children that are not wanted, that they may not be able to care for, and that may cause health issues with the mothers up to and including death. They continue to claim that they care about children, but are unwilling to do anything to create a society that ensures that they're able to live and have a decent life. They're much less concerned about the sanctity of life if a child is shot by a cop. And that's been proven time and time again. If an officer says that they felt fear from a 13-year-old who's having a mental health crisis and shoots them 10 or 11 times, they'll be exonerated. It's simply a unfortunate but necessary part of law enforcement to shoot or kill children. But the officer is not at fault because they felt afraid. So why would a woman who is bearing a child, when she knows that going through the process to term may damage or destroy her body, or that bringing that child into the world would not only destroy her livelihood, but create a situation where a new life is born into a world without the necessary care. So many of these people, whether it's in South Carolina with their execution procedures, or Texas with their draconian pro-birth laws, they continue to claim that they are pro-life, but it's obvious that they are not. They are pro-control, pro-revenge, pro-birth, but they are not pro-life. As soon as a child is born, they have shown time and time again that they are willing to leave them in situations without access to anything from health care to stable living conditions. They're fine with forcing children to be born, but they refuse to take any responsibility in making sure that their fellow man is cared for after that point, and they constantly shoot down any attempts of anybody else to do the same. It's never made sense to me how easily individuals can claim to be concerned for the welfare of mankind and then turn around and make sure that any legal protections that are put in place to make sure that the average people have a good life are shot down. It's the type of hypocrisy that should be so glaring that it should smack them in the face every time they wake up in the morning. Like most people, I'll be watching to see how these situations turn out. My view on it is obvious. We're not in a situation where there is a need to continually have people born into a world where they will not have the standard of living necessary for them to have a guaranteed happy life, and definitely not to force a person to go through the burden and danger of childbirth when it's unwanted. There is a clear difference between a potential person who is growing and a person who is already born and here and able to speak and think for themselves. I will always make a choice to value the rights and the health of a person than I will over a potential person. Once a child is able to exist outside of the womb, it's a different situation. But that sure as hell isn't present at 6 weeks. As with everything else, these are my thoughts that I'd like to make sure are clear and understood, are as clear as I can make them in my often disjointed way of speaking. But as I've had these types of discussions and often outright arguments with people over the years, I felt that it was important, especially now, to make it very clear on what my views and feelings are concerning these elements. Would I like to have an easy way out for these types of difficult questions? Sure. The thought that you can say, there's a bad guy, kill him, everything is all right, is what drives the process of executions in the United States. People want an easy answer to difficult problems. We've been raised on the concept of, there's a bad guy, shoot him, the problem is solved, we can ride off into the sunset. But the real world doesn't work that way. And pushing unnecessary executions, especially increasingly brutal ones, continues to build on that misconception. Vengeance is not going to make the world a better place. It's simply going to make it a scarier one. I would like to be able to say, The easy answer is all babies are wonderful gifts from God that are going to make the world a better place. But that's not the truth. In the United States, there's an unfortunate issue with women having very difficult pregnancies and dying in childbirth because of the lackluster medical care available to the average person. There is a ridiculous issue with children being placed in foster care or being forced to live in very low income, unhealthy situations in environments that are tainted by chemical runoff and air pollution, because we've decided that regulating factories and industries is less important than making sure that we have a healthy environment for children to grow in. Companies are fine with children getting lead poisoning from tainted river water, as long as it makes sure that they get a little bit extra on their bottom line. Until people in the United States are willing to ensure that both expectant mothers and children are able to receive consistent and high quality health care and living conditions, there's no need to try and push additional births in the United States. You're not willing to take care of people, stop forcing them to be born into this world. There are plenty of us that wake up in this situation and wish that we were never born. And you have no right to not only force that onto another generation, but to force the pain, the pressure, the damage, the potential death onto a woman who is working to live the best life that she is capable of. Let that be a choice that she makes on whether or not to carry that pregnancy to term or to end it and continue to live her life in the best way that she is capable. As always, you're welcome to, and you most likely will, disagree with my views. I'm used to that. But I've given them to you. If you've been able to sit and listen to them this long, try not to misrepresent them the next time you decide to have an argument over what I do or don't believe. These are my thoughts. Just a few more thoughts from a bookworm who's so insane that he believes that people should be taken care of. Be safe, and please try to be good to each other.